Hi, I'm Tony Jones. Here's a bonus question we couldn't fit into Q&A. It's from Michael Spickmons.
Most of the modest inflation rate contributions come from areas in which consumers have little choice, for example, gas prices. Before the government starts to claim that the economy is doing great by looking at the macroeconomic statistics, should they not have a look at how the lower to middle class workers are living their life? That is, where people have to cut down on discretionary spending to cover compulsory spending, largely due to weaker wage growth.
I'll start to Terry because that's something you started talking about and I cut you off.
No, that's absolutely right. Michael, it's incredibly important that we deal with the issue of wages. You know, I'm sure, that we've had quarters recently where the wage price index was less than CPI. In other words, wages grew less quickly than inflation, than prices. And what that means is, in real terms, a cut in your pay, a cut in your income. You will also be aware that we have a situation now where the profit share of national income has been growing for a very long time, and commensurately the labour share has been falling. It's now a very unbalanced community that we live in, and it's also very unequal. We've also seen all of the statistics in relation to differences between the top end of town and everybody else. And I know Chris kind of brushed away this idea that we should care about the 1% versus everybody else and described it as the politics of envy. But I think it's the politics of justice. It's actually a question about how do we have the situation where we're getting such a great big gap between a very small handful of people, concentration of wealth and assets in their hands, and everybody else. And why is wages growth so slow? And, you know, there's a range of thought around this. And my own view about this is it's pretty simple. It boils down to people don't have the bargaining power that they used to have. They don't have the power. Most things end up coming back to power. If you don't have the power, then it's not enough to just go and ask nicely for your employer to give you a wage rise, or to just expect that they're just going to, out of the goodness of their heart, give you a wage rise. It actually comes down to the relationship and the power that you have within it. So we actually need to deal with the question of working people's power, not just traditional employees, people in the gig economy. If you've got kids, are you worried about whether or not they're going to end up working for Uber or Deliveroo or some sort of job where you don't have any conditions, you don't have sick leave, you don't have really anything to support you to have security? If you're 15 years old, are you worried about what your future is going to bring? If you are worried about that, I'm worried about that for my kids, then the answer has got to be looking at what we can do for power at work. And as I said before, the Reserve Bank Governor has been very clear about the importance to our entire economy of lifting wages. That's up, and I respectfully agree with him, of course.
OK, Chris Kenny.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think it's very similar to the one we had here about the challenges facing younger people. And I think that we are putting too much of a cost burden on future generations, whether it's additional taxation now, whether it's debt that is going to be additional taxation in the future. Instead of cutting government expenditure, we've been expanding it, whether you want a new government broadband monopoly, an NDIS that we obviously want the services it provides, but how do we fund it? We haven't seen any courage from governments when it comes to controlling their expenditure. So we're all carrying higher costs. But where I differ with John Hewson is on climate. Quite the opposite is happening. We're inflicting high energy prices that hurt people, working families, worse than anyone else. The less discretionary income you have, the more the high power prices hurt you. There's no discernible environmental gain from Australia's futile climate gestures, yet we're deliberately hurting ourselves with some of the world's highest electricity prices and decreasing reliability of supply. It is madness. A lot of people making money out of it if you're investing money in renewable projects with guaranteed subsidies from the rest of the energy sector, but it's just putting heavy costs on people who are trying to get started in life.
Dan Badham.
The reality of power prices in Australia is that the more privatised your state's power, the higher your power bills are. One of the miracles in South Australia now... No, it's not irrelevant, Chris. It's not irrelevant. People want to feel surety in the economy and know that the economy is going to be there to look after them, that we'll have a state that will be... Chris, let me talk. The cameras aren't running, all right? This is a young man who's...
The cameras are running, Van.
Oh,
they are running.
Going out on...
You've interrupted once or twice tonight, but
Chris,
Victoria was the first state to privatise and had the lowest power prices.
You've interrupted her a number of times, and you've complained every time she interrupted you.
No, just making a simple factual point.
You've interrupted her a number of times. She's interrupted you. It's absolutely fine. This is a conversation. But maybe don't complain about it when she interrupts you and then interrupt her.
OK, Dan.
So I think what you need to be really aware of
See, they like you. They like you.
All right,
The
okay,
reality is that
sidebar.
we're losing, the people are actually losing control of the economy. So many things have been privatised, outsourced, even the Reserve Bank, you know, decisions made around interest rates, which have been sent out to different agencies. And that's a real concern because it means when there is some kind of economic crisis, our ability to respond to it becomes really difficult. When it comes to energy crises as well, when you have privatised corporations who are motivated by a profit motive, that's not about delivering all these different kinds of services to people, it's about making money. But, you know, this concern about the lower end of the economy, we have a government that let the penalty rate cut go through. Well, the argument was that cuts to penalty rates would create more jobs in small business and suddenly there'd be more jobs. The reality is that more jobs haven't been created. In fact, retail spending has slowed. So there's a greater threat to small business from the fact there is not money being pumped into the discretionary spending end of the economy, which is at the bottom amongst those who have the lowest incomes. And this is the problem with this whole, tax cut mantra that Chris is insisting upon. Oh, we just have to do it. We just have to do it to be competitive. Multinational corporations do not come to Australia because of our tax environment. They come because either we have really skilled workers that they want, or we have a market with enough money so they can sell things to.
And we're going to have to. We can't. I know the cameras aren't rolling, but doesn't mean we don't have some time limit. So I got to. First of all, just John Hewson. I'll let you finish off, Linda. But John Hewson, the tax cut mantra. Are you saying we can't afford, for example, personal income tax cuts, which seem to be the next thing on the agenda, maybe as soon as this coming budget?
My point on tax is that there are a series of pressure points in the tax system that we need to look at holistically. You can't just try and fix one little bit of the tax system and figure that's all you need to do. You've got to have overarching reform. If you want to do something about company tax, you also have to do something about bracket creep and people paying more and more tax on average incomes, or on some of the other abuses of the system, big companies being able to shift their profits offshore, not paying any tax in this country. All those elements, and there are a lot of other pressure points in the tax system, so you need holistic reform. I think the key point behind that question is that cost of living is the fundamentally important political issue today. And it's an issue on which neither side has any definitive answers. Because a lot of the areas in which the average household is getting ripped off in their sense, either because of the cost of housing or the cost of electricity or childcare or whatever, health insurance, are areas in which we have a concentration of economic power. We have oligopolies setting prices.
Yes.
They're non-market outcomes. And so to see that an AGL is recently going to boast another $1 billion profit, thinking, hang on, I mean, I'm struggling with electricity prices. And you go with the health insurance, allowed a concentration in the health insurance sector. We have 2 supermarkets in this country that control about 85% of the supermarket market. And we let them control petrol and grog and insurance, and they're moving into all sorts of areas. That influence is what's underwriting the dramatic increase in the cost of living. And the average family in this country has struggled. They've run up huge credit card debts, mortgage debts. We have... household debt is now about 200% of GDP.
That's right.
Of disposable income, about 120% of GDP. That's the bottom line. Now, we can't turn that around. The Reserve Bank can't respond to another crisis by putting interest rates up because you'll send all those households to the wall.
Okay, all right.
Except that you should... I think
No, hang on a sec, Terry. We're nearly out of time. I promised Linda the last word here, so she should have it.
Thank you.
But discretionary spending, you can put wages up, you can lower taxes, or you can fix the problems of the cost of living. At least one of those things seems to be beyond your capabilities. So what about the other two?
Look, I think, Michael and Anne, you've really hit the nail on the head in terms of the discussions we've now, again, other discussions we've now got to have as a country. And all of us in politics, there's not a single person who doesn't want to make sure that all Australians has equal access to healthcare, that people can get a job, that people can afford to feed their family and do all of the things that we all want in life. We all want that. There's no one who wants the NDIS more funded than I do. But where we differ is how we pay for that. So I firmly believe as a Liberal that, there is, for those of you who are old enough to remember the old magic pudding, there is no magic pudding of money somewhere. To spend it, you have to earn it. And we do live in a very competitive world, and the world that you grow up in, it will be even much more, border free. So the question is how in this new world, one that's so different from the world I grew up in, And your children, Anne, will grow up in a very different world. And we're not having the conversations as a society we need in how to make sure that your needs are met, but also so that people who want work can get a job. But how do we also take the pressure off electricity and all of the other factors? And that's where the two parties, I think, differ the most, is we think you've got to go out and earn it. And, we have to compete to get that money from overseas. And there is no magic pudding that can just pick money. Basically, the Labor solution is robbing Peter to pay Paul.
No.
We want to get more money and more
I'm
jobs.
afraid we're going to have to leave it there because we really are. We can't keep the audience here all night. We'll end it there. Thanks, Michael Spickmans, I beg your pardon, for your question.
Great question.
And we'll see you again next week. Thank you.